Amid the raging storm, a horse lay battered and abandoned, her breaths shallow, her body broken. A man found her, a flicker of life still in her eyes, and saved her. Weeks passed, and just when all hope seemed lost, she rose, scarred but unbroken. That first gallop left everyone stunned. The rain fell relentlessly, turning the land into a muddy, treacherous expanse. Caleb Reed hunched against the biting wind, securing the last of his livestock in the barn. At 58, his body ached with every movement, the damp weather seeping into his joints. But decades of farming had taught him one thing: never leave a job unfinished. Then he heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the storm. A desperate, pain-filled whinny rose above the howling wind. "Fiona!" he called, pushing the barn door open against the gusts. "Bring me the flashlight and the emergency kit." Moments later, his wife appeared, her face etched with worry. "Caleb, you can't go out there. The creek's already flooding." "Something's hurt out there," he said firmly, testing the flashlight's beam. "I can't just leave it." Following the eerie cry, he trudged through the storm, the flashlight's beam cutting through the rain. At the creek's edge, his breath caught. A horse, majestic even in its misery, lay half-submerged in the rising waters. Its once beautiful chestnut coat was caked in blood and mud, a deep gash running along its flank. One leg was grotesquely twisted. "Dear God," Caleb whispered, stepping closer. The horse's eyes, wide with terror, locked onto him. It struggled to rise but collapsed again, letting out a sound that pierced through the storm. Caleb's pulse quickened. He had seconds to act. The water was rising, threatening to pull the injured animal under, but moving her in this state could kill them both. "Easy, girl," he murmured, inching closer. "I'm not going to hurt you." Something shifted in her eyes. Fear softened, and a flicker of trust emerged. Later, Caleb would remember this moment as the turning point. Kneeling in the freezing water, he ran his hands over her trembling body, assessing the damage. Female, around 6 years old. Her injuries were severe, but not yet fatal. The real enemy was time. "Fiona!" he shouted. "Call Doc Hayes! Get Grant from next door! We're going to need help!" Within an hour, Grant and his sons arrived with their tractor, and Doc Hayes braved the storm with his medical supplies. Together, they worked under the barn's flickering lantern light to stabilize the horse and move her to safety. Doc's face was grim as he examined the wound. "She's been shot," he said. "Probably a hunting accident. Bullet might still be in there." "Can you save her?" Caleb asked, though he already knew his answer. He wouldn't let her go. Doc held his gaze. "I'll try, but even if she survives tonight, she'll need weeks of care. That leg, she may never walk right again." Caleb nodded, his jaw set. "Then we'll take it one day at a time." As the others filed into the house to wait out the storm, Caleb stayed in the barn. He spread fresh blankets over the horse and whispered, "We'll call you Phoenix." Her matted coat glinted faintly in the lantern light, the deep red beneath the grime glowing like dying coals. Phoenix's labored breaths slowed as her eyes followed Caleb's every move. "You're safe now," he said gently. "Whatever happened, it's over. Just stay with us." Outside, the storm raged on, but within the barn, hope began to stir. By dawn, the skies had cleared, and Phoenix lay resting, alive and surrounded by warmth. The first light of morning, a promise of the fight ahead. Caleb hadn't slept at all, his eyes fixed on the barn window where dawn began to creep in, casting a soft golden light over Phoenix's still form. She had barely survived the night, but she had survived. Doc Hayes returned, his face lined with exhaustion, carrying his medical kit. "We've got to operate now," he said firmly, unpacking his tools. "The bullet needs to come out, and those wounds have to be treated properly." The hours that followed were a grueling blend of grit and determination. Fiona kept the supplies coming. Hot water, clean towels, while Grant's boys steadied Phoenix through the critical moments. "There's more here than meets the eye," Doc Hayes muttered as he worked. He gestured toward her legs, marred with old scars. "See the muscle structure? She was trained for racing, but something went wrong. These aren't from accidents. Someone's abused her." Caleb's jaw tightened. In the close-knit farming community of Millbrook Valley, cruelty like this was rare, but not unheard of. Trainers pushing horses to their limits for a quick buck. "The bullet wound is fresh," the vet continued. "But these scars, she's been through hell for at least a year." Phoenix stirred weakly, as if she understood the conversation. Caleb leaned in, stroking her neck gently. "That's all behind you now," he whispered. "I promise." By midday, the operation was over. The bullet was gone, the wounds stitched, and her broken leg set. Doc Hayes wiped his forehead, his voice heavy with the weight of the unknown. "I've done everything I can. The rest is up to her, and you'll need round-the-clock care for 2 weeks, minimum." Fiona, ever steady, appeared with coffee and sandwiches. "We'll manage," she said with quiet resolve, her hand on Caleb's shoulder. "We always do." But as news of Phoenix spread, the town's reactions were divided. Grant's family offered help, but others weren't so kind. Dale Prescott, the local livestock dealer, scoffed when he visited that afternoon. "You're wasting your time, Caleb," he said. "A horse in that shape? Better to put her down and move on." Caleb didn't flinch. "You didn't see her eyes, Dale. She's got fight left in her." The first week was brutal. Phoenix couldn't stand, and they had to turn her every few hours to prevent sores. Caleb slept in the barn, waking to give her medicine and adjust her position. Fiona worried, but she knew her husband's determination. "Remember that calf?" she reminded him one night, bringing dinner to the barn. "The one everyone said wouldn't survive? You proved them wrong. He lived 12 years because of you." Caleb smiled faintly, taking the plate. "This is different, Fiona. Phoenix. She's special, I feel it." As if on cue, Phoenix lifted her head and let out a soft nicker, the first sound she'd made since the surgery. Tears welled in Fiona's eyes. "Looks like we've got ourselves a new family member," she said, her voice breaking. By the second week, small victories began to appear. Phoenix's appetite improved, her eyes brightened, and her wounds began to heal. Doc Hayes, visiting every other day, grew more hopeful. "I've seen stronger horses give up with less," he admitted, a hint of admiration in his voice. Phoenix's spirit was undeniable. "She's been fighting hard, and having you here makes a world of difference," the vet had said during a checkup. "Horses are deeply attuned to energy. She knows you're on her side." Word of Phoenix's progress spread, and soon the whole community rallied behind her. Schoolchildren visited the barn after class, reading aloud because someone had told them horses loved voices. Farmers began dropping off hay and medicine, refusing any payment. Even the weather seemed to conspire in her favor, with warm days that let sunlight flood the barn and fresh air keep the space alive. Phoenix began to perk up, her ears twitching at new sounds outside the barn doors. One morning, during their routine, Caleb noticed something new in her eyes, a glimmer of life that hadn't been there before. She tracked his movements with a sharper focus, responding to his voice with flicks of her ears. "You're coming back to us, aren't you?" he murmured, brushing her coat. Slowly, The mud and matted fur gave way to a gleaming chestnut hue, a reminder of the strength and beauty hidden beneath her scars. An hour later, Fiona found him still at her side, talking softly as he worked. Watching him, she smiled, reminded of the quiet tenderness that had drawn her to him so many years ago. "Lunch is ready," she announced. "And Tessa from the feed store called. She's got some supplements that might help her recovery." Caleb gave Phoenix a final pat and nodded. "We're getting there," he said, his voice full of quiet determination. "One day at a time." 3 weeks after the storm, as sunlight streamed through the barn, Caleb noticed Phoenix trembling in a way he hadn't seen before. "Easy, girl," he said, moving closer. But it wasn't distress. It was resolve. She was trying to stand. "Fiona!" he called out, his voice urgent. "Come quick!" Together, they watched as Phoenix strained, her muscles quivering and her injured leg barely grazing the ground. For a moment, it seemed impossible. Then, with a final push, she rose. She swayed precariously but stayed upright, defying every expectation. Caleb stepped closer, his heart racing. "That's it, girl. You've got this," he whispered. Phoenix stood for nearly a minute before sinking back down. But that one moment changed everything. It proved she wasn't giving up. When the vet arrived later, he was astonished. "This is a turning point," he said. "We can start planning her full rehabilitation. But it won't be easy. Standing is one thing. Teaching her to walk again is a whole new challenge." As if summoned by fate, a familiar figure appeared that afternoon. Liam McCarty, a retired horse trainer known for his gentle methods, rolled up in his weathered pickup. "Heard about your miracle horse," he said with a nod. "Figured I might lend a hand." For decades, Liam had specialized in rehabilitating injured horses, his approach rooted in patience and trust. "Healing isn't just physical," he explained as they watched Phoenix. "She's got emotional wounds too. Each step forward needs to build her confidence as much as her strength." Over the days that followed, Liam became a fixture at the farm, teaching Caleb how to support Phoenix's weight, prevent muscle atrophy, and read her subtle signals. "See her ears flick just now?" Liam said one afternoon. "She's ready for more, but watch her eyes. They'll tell you when she's had enough." The road ahead was long and grueling, but in every careful movement and small triumph, hope grew stronger. They began with simple standing exercises, gradually extending the time. Often, Amber would lean heavily against Caleb for support, and this reliance on each other deepened their bond in a way words never could. Even Fiona noticed the transformation in her husband. Though the work was draining, he seemed invigorated, more alive. Late into the night, she'd find him poring over veterinary books, scribbling notes about rehabilitation techniques and horse psychology, his purpose clear. Word of Phoenix's recovery quickly spread through the village. Children would drop by after school, arms full of carrots and apples, their laughter filling the barn. Their joy seemed to awaken something in Phoenix. Her gentle, intelligent, and even playful side began to shine through, despite her lingering injuries. Then, one morning, a month after her first attempt to stand, Phoenix surprised them all. As Caleb entered the barn with her breakfast, she let out a soft nicker and, with trembling resolve, took 3 unsteady steps toward him. "Would you look at that?" Liam whispered from the doorway, his voice thick with emotion. "She's not just walking. She's walking to you, Caleb." Those shaky steps marked a turning point. Each day brought subtle but steady improvements, stronger strides, better balance, and increasing confidence. Though her injured leg would never be the same, Phoenix adapted, learning to move with surprising grace. News of her progress traveled beyond their small community. A local reporter visited to write a story, focusing not just on Phoenix's physical recovery, but on how her journey had brought hope to everyone around her. "It's more than just a horse healing," Fiona told the reporter. "It's about finding hope when it feels like there's none left." The story caught the attention of a group specializing in rehabilitating former racehorses. They offered specialized equipment and expert advice, confirming what Caleb and Fiona had suspected. Phoenix had once been a racehorse, discarded when her injuries made her unprofitable. "Some people see horses as investments," Liam said bitterly when he heard the news. "But they're living beings with hearts and spirits. What you're doing here, Caleb, you're healing more than just her body. You're saving her soul." As summer approached, Phoenix's progress astounded everyone. She could now walk the length of the barn several times a day, her limp noticeable, but her determination unwavering. One evening, Caleb sat on a hay bale reading when Phoenix slowly approached, resting her head gently on his shoulder, a quiet act of trust. Stroking her neck, he whispered, "Everyone thinks I saved you, but the truth is, you've given me just as much." By autumn, Phoenix's recovery exceeded all expectations. She spent hours in a specially designed paddock, her coat gleaming under the crisp sunlight. Yet their peace was shattered one morning when a sleek black car arrived. A well-dressed man introduced himself as Marcus Thatcher, representing Golden Gate Stables. "Mr. Reed?" he said, holding out documents. "I believe you have our horse." Caleb's heart sank. Beside him, Fiona gripped his arm. "Our records show this mare was sold to us 2 years ago," Thatcher continued. "She was reported stolen 6 months later. We've been tracking her since the article in the county paper." The papers seemed legitimate. Registration documents, sale contracts, and photographs of a younger Phoenix at Golden Gate Stables. But something felt wrong. "If she was so valuable to you," Caleb said carefully, "why wasn't there a wider search when she disappeared? And how did she end up shot and half dead in my creek?" Thatcher's polished smile wavered, just barely. "Those are unfortunate circumstances we're still reviewing. However, the legal ownership is indisputable. We're willing to reimburse you for the costs you've incurred rehabilitating her." Old Liam, standing nearby that morning, had been listening silently, his weathered face betraying a thoughtful seriousness. Stepping forward, he said almost casually, "Golden Gate Stables. Didn't they get investigated last year for insurance fraud? Something about reporting horses stolen after they'd been injured." Thatcher's cheeks flushed. "Those claims were never proven." "Maybe not," Liam replied, his tone steady. "But I've heard other stories. Horses vanishing after they stopped bringing in wins." The yard grew tense. Even Phoenix, watching from her paddock, seemed to feel it. She gave a soft nicker, pressing herself into the furthest corner as if to stay as far from Thatcher as possible. "I'll tell you what," Caleb finally said, breaking the silence. "I'll have my lawyer review these papers, and I'm pretty sure the sheriff would want to know how one of your horses ended up shot and left for dead." Thatcher's expression cracked. "Mr. Reed, be reasonable. This could get very costly for you very quickly." Before Caleb could respond, Fiona stepped forward, her usually kind features hardened with anger. "Is that a threat, Mr. Thatcher?" she asked, her voice steady and unyielding. "Because I'm sure the local news would be very interested in how a prestigious stable treats its horses and the farmers who save them." By the next morning, the farm had become a gathering place. News of Thatcher's visit spread quickly, and neighbors began arriving. First came Grant and his sons, then other farmers, friends, and even the children who regularly visited Phoenix. They stood in silent solidarity. Sheriff Davies arrived too, and after reviewing the documents, he raised an eyebrow. Funny timing, he said. You only come for her after she's healthy. Thatcher left that afternoon, muttering promises to return with lawyers. But there was no mistaking the defeat in his posture. The investigation that followed unraveled everything. Golden Gate Stables had been running an insurance scam, discarding injured horses and claiming they'd been stolen. Phoenix was one of their victims, left for dead after her injuries made her unsuitable for racing. The revelations led to multiple arrests, the stables closure, and reforms in local laws to protect horses like Phoenix. One evening, as Caleb watched Phoenix graze under the fading light, Liam stood beside him. It's funny how it works, Liam mused. Sometimes one story is all it takes to make people see. What happened to her is changing things for the better. 3 months later, Caleb received official confirmation of his ownership of Phoenix. But he already knew the truth. Phoenix had chosen her home the night she defied death in that storm. To celebrate, the community threw a small festival. Children adorned Phoenix's paddock with colorful ribbons and flowers. Local farmers brought hay and treats, and the county paper sent a photographer to capture the day. Phoenix, wearing a bright halter, walked proudly among her admirers, her journey written in every healed scar and confident step. She's smiling, Fiona said, watching Phoenix nuzzle the hands of delighted children. I never knew horses could smile until I met her. That evening, with the barn quiet and the valley wrapped in winter's first snow, Caleb sat in his usual spot. Phoenix approached, her scarred legs strong and steady. Resting a hand on her neck, he smiled. We did it, girl, he whispered. We showed them what's possible when you don't give up. Inside Caleb's barn, a quiet transformation was underway. News of Phoenix's recovery had drawn unexpected interest, far beyond the media spotlight. One snowy morning, Dr. Tessa Clark, a veterinary rehabilitation specialist from the State University, arrived, inspired by what she had heard. Watching Phoenix move with determined grace in her paddock, she turned to Caleb. Mr. Reed, she said, her tone both admiring and thoughtful. What you've done here is extraordinary. Have you considered turning this into something bigger? Her proposal was ambitious. The university wanted to create a satellite rehabilitation center for injured horses, using Caleb's farm as its foundation. They offered funding, expertise, and resources while preserving the personal, compassionate methods that had been key to Phoenix's recovery. It's not just about physical rehabilitation, Dr. Clark explained. It's your approach, the emotional healing, the way the community has rallied behind you. That's what makes this so special. Imagine how many more horses we could help. That evening, Fiona found Caleb in the barn, leaning against Phoenix's stall in deep thought. You're thinking about it, aren't you? She asked softly. He nodded, his eyes fixed on Phoenix as she dozed peacefully. I keep remembering that storm, he said, his voice low. What if no one had found her? How many others out there are waiting for someone to hear them? The decision wasn't easy. Opening the farm to such a project would mean drastic changes to their quiet way of life. But when they presented the idea at a town hall meeting, the community's support was overwhelming. My boys can help with construction, Grant offered, and you can use that spare pasture by my land for recovering horses. Tessa from the feed store chimed in next. I'll coordinate special feed orders, and my daughter's in veterinary school. She'd love to intern here. Even Dale Whitaker, once skeptical of Phoenix's chances, stood up. Those old stables my grandfather left by the creek. They're yours if you need them. As winter melted into spring, the project, named Phoenix's Hope, took shape. University architects designed therapeutic facilities, while local contractors donated time and supplies. The community organized fundraisers, turning the farm into something extraordinary. At the heart of it all was Phoenix, whose quiet resilience continued to inspire everyone. Her true impact shone when the first new arrival, a terrified young stallion injured in a transport accident, came to the sanctuary. He was aggressive and distrusting, much like Phoenix had been that first night. To everyone's amazement, Phoenix approached the paddock fence, nickering softly to the frightened stallion. Over the following days, her calm presence soothed him. She stood with him for hours, as if showing him that healing was possible. "She remembers," Liam said, watching the gentle interaction. "She knows what it's like to be where he is, and she's showing him the way out." As spring bloomed, more horses arrived, each carrying their own scars of trauma and neglect. They thrived under the unique mix of expert care and community love that had saved Phoenix. University students came to learn, writing about the sanctuary's profound impact. "It's not just rehabilitation," one student wrote in her thesis. "It's the restoration of hope for the horses and for everyone involved." Local schools brought children to learn compassion through horse care, and veterans found therapeutic solace in working with the animals. The sanctuary's reach extended far beyond the paddocks, healing hearts and lives. 1 year to the day after finding Phoenix in the storm, Caleb stood in the middle of the bustling sanctuary. He watched as horses roamed freely, volunteers worked side by side, and laughter filled the air. What had begun as a single act of compassion had grown into something far greater, a place where hope was not just restored but shared with everyone who came. The barn had transformed into a state-of-the-art facility, yet it never lost the warmth and welcoming charm that made it special. Rolling hills stretched beyond, dotted with paddocks where horses in recovery roamed freely, each carrying a story of survival. Phoenix, now fully healed save for a slight limp that only added to her character, stood proudly beside him. No longer just a patient, she had become a teacher, showing humans and horses alike the strength found in resilience and trust. "You know, girl," Caleb murmured, scratching her favorite spot behind her ears. "Sometimes the greatest miracles begin with the smallest acts of kindness." As if she understood, Phoenix pressed her head against his shoulder, her eyes gleaming with the same indomitable spirit that had first captivated him on that stormy night. Around them, the sanctuary was alive with the hum of life, veterinarians attending to horses, volunteers caring for the paddocks, children learning about animal care, and the steady, comforting rhythm of healing in motion. 5 years had passed since that fateful storm, and Phoenix's journey had grown into something far beyond anyone's imagination. The sanctuary now spanned 50 acres, complete with advanced rehabilitation facilities, a veterinary clinic, and educational centers. Yet, despite its impressive growth, it remained grounded in the personal touch that made it extraordinary. On a warm summer morning, Caleb sat under the shade of a towering oak tree, his favorite spot overlooking the paddocks. Phoenix, now 27, bore the gentle signs of age, her muzzle grayed, but her spirit as fierce and radiant as ever. "Mr. Reed," called Zoe, a spirited 10-year-old who had been visiting the sanctuary since kindergarten. She dashed up the path, a group of new volunteers trailing behind her. "Can you tell us the story again? The one about how you found Phoenix?" Hearing her name, Phoenix perked up, ambling toward the fence as Zoe extended her hand to greet her. Caleb smiled as he began. "It was one of those nights when any sensible person would have stayed inside." As he shared the tale, he saw the awe on the faces around him. This wasn't just a story about a horse's rescue. It was a lesson in hope, determination, and the transformative power of kindness. Over the years, Phoenix's story had inspired the rescue and rehabilitation of more than 200 horses. But her impact extended far beyond the animals. There was Hunter, a troubled teenager who discovered purpose working with the horses. Now, he was pursuing a veterinary degree. And Maria, a veteran battling PTSD, who found healing through the sanctuary's therapeutic riding program. She now led those very sessions, offering the same hope she had found. The sanctuary's innovative methods had drawn attention nationwide, blending expert veterinary care with the emotional healing of human-animal connection, setting a new standard in equine rehabilitation. Even the local community had transformed. Stronger horse protection laws were in place, and stables across the county had raised their standards of care. The thing about Phoenix, Caleb said as he neared the end of his story, is that she didn't just survive. She taught us how to be better humans. At that moment, Phoenix lifted her head and let out a soft nicker, answered by a nearby mare, a recent rescue still adjusting to her new surroundings. Watching the exchange, Caleb felt the familiar surge of awe at Phoenix's unique ability to connect with both humans and horses, bridging a silent but profound understanding. Fiona appeared, carrying a tray of lemonade for the volunteers. Her hair, like Phoenix's coat, had grown streaked with grey, but her eyes still sparkled with the same kindness that had fueled their mission from the start. Sitting beside Caleb, she said, "You know, back when you stayed up all those nights with her, I never thought we'd come this far." "Neither did I," Caleb replied, watching Zoe feed Phoenix an apple with gentle hands. "But sometimes, the best dreams are the ones we didn't even know we had." The sanctuary was more than a place of recovery. It had become a testament to the boundless possibilities when compassion and determination came together. Every horse that found healing and a new home, every soul that rediscovered hope within those fences became another thread woven into Phoenix's remarkable story. As the sun dipped below the horizon, stretching golden light across the paddocks, Caleb made his customary evening rounds. Each horse carried its own tale of hardship and recovery, but they all shared one unifying truth. They'd been given a second chance, just like Phoenix. In her paddock, she stood quietly, her gaze calm and watchful, as if overseeing her sanctuary. Once a discarded racehorse, she had transformed into something far greater, a teacher, a healer, and an enduring symbol of resilience. "You know, old girl," Caleb murmured, resting a hand on the gate, "you didn't just survive that storm. You taught us all how to face our own." Phoenix pressed her muzzle against his hand, her breath soft and warm in the cool twilight. Around them, the sanctuary embraced its nightly rhythm, horses nickering in their stalls, volunteers finishing their final tasks, and the faint laughter of children fading with the dusk. This was Phoenix's true legacy, not just the barns or the programs that bore her name, but the lives she had forever changed, human and equine alike. She had proven that the broken can become unbreakable, and that healing is possible when compassion guides the way. As night enveloped the valley, the warm glow of the sanctuary's lights stood as a beacon of hope for all who needed it. In her cozy stall, surrounded by the love she had inspired, Phoenix rested, her legacy alive in every life she had touched, her spirit a quiet but powerful presence in the stillness of the night. Wow, what a journey, right? Let me just say, up front, this story isn't real, but it feels so real because it taps into something deeply human. It's not just about a horse or a storm, it's about resilience, compassion, and how far we're willing to go to make a difference. Phoenix's story reminds us that even in the darkest moments, a flicker of hope can lead to incredible transformations. Caleb didn't just save a horse, he gave it a second chance. And in the process, it changed his life and an entire community. That's the beauty of stories like this. They challenge us to think about what we'd do in the same situation. Would we push through the storm? Would we stand up against injustice? And most importantly, would we open our hearts to those who need us most? The message here is so powerful. Healing takes time, patience, and love. Whether we're talking about animals, people, or even ourselves. Phoenix's journey from broken to unbreakable is a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can create ripples we never imagined. Now, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What stood out to you the most? Was it Caleb's unwavering determination, Phoenix's incredible will to live, or maybe the way an entire community rallied behind this one seemingly impossible cause? Let me know in the comments. Let's start a conversation. And hey, if this story moved you like it moved me, don't forget to share it with someone who might need a little hope today. Thanks for sticking around, friends. Until next time, take care. And remember, sometimes the greatest miracles begin with the smallest acts of kindness.